Hi, dearest lovely. My name is Kaylin Vu, and it's such a pleasure to meet you. I'm the founder of Dear Lovely Universe. My mission is to help people live their best lives possible by transforming them into the best versions of themselves. Zach, can you please tell me more about yourself?
Okay. Um, I am a portrait photographer and an entrepreneur. I came from a welding background
Mm-hmm.
where I was working the whole 9 to 5 thing, miserable, like most people are today. And I wanted something else. It didn't give me fulfillment within my life. And so throughout my hunger for a different life, I decided to pick up some books, and it changed my perspective on life, changed who I was as a person. That opened up the opportunity for photography, and now I am a self-made entrepreneur. And
That's so awesome.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
um, would you like me to explain anything else, like hobbies and such?
Um, I think we should dive into kind of like what was your life a little more as a welder? Can you talk a little more about that?
Okay. As a welder,
Mm-hmm.
well, I first started out going to school for about a year and did general ed. I didn't really like it at all. I found that most of the classes I took didn't actually bring in an education that would help me out with my life. And so I took a year off and did martial arts. And eventually I found out about trade schools.
Mm-hmm.
And trade schools was something that really sparked my interest because it was something that you do and learn, or it's something that you go to and then you learn everything towards your career. So everything you learn is actually applied to what you do. So I ended up looking online, or not looking online, but someone at my jujitsu gym
Mm-hmm.
told me to then try welding, saying like you can make good money, it'd be a good place to go. And I looked it up that night, I YouTubed it, and I saw that it was just sparks flying everywhere, and you could heat up metal, and it was just this really cool process that I fell in love with instantly. And so after that, I ended up finding a college that had this program and started my journey. I'd say about a year in, I got certified in a couple different processes and got a job. And um, my first job wasn't actually in welding, it was more a welding supply store. So I was rolling around cylinders for about a year and destroying my body and basically just wasting time, not actually doing anything towards my career, but just trying to find um, experience within my job. And eventually I got really tired of that and finally got a welding position. And once I got this welding position, everything wasn't as I expected. It was just very cutthroat and people were not very kind. The industry itself is very demanding and um, just very egotistical. Like it's kind of like too much testosterone,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just not a good place to be as far as like making relationships. And it's pretty much like they're really wanting you to be forced to just pump out as much work as possible without little regard for your health or your actual mental health or any type of health. And um, the reason why I stayed in for so long was because as I my schooling, I noticed that there was one job that was amazing to have, that one of my instructors promises to students that do really well. And so my whole journey was going through all of these jobs that I didn't love to get to this job that would be amazing, where it would be high pay,
Mm-hmm.
um, a cool place to work, enjoyable. And so after 4 years of working and finally earning up all of my certificates to actually in this job, once I got there, it was cool for about the first month or so. And it was just basically you get to practice welding all day with a friend and you're just chilling in some basement where you're alone and practicing and getting all your certifications so that you can go up on the floor to then work on jet parts. So once you get up onto the floor, that's when things kind of hit me. that it was the same thing as everything else, where the boss was just unkind, unfriendly, didn't care about who you are, just wanted work to be done.
Yeah.
Most of the people around me were couple guys that were like 6 years old, and you could just tell. And they're always trying to get me to do overtime, talking about how much money you can make, and just seeing them extremely miserable and just wasting their life just for money in a place that doesn't care about them and that will fire them and replace them in an instant, even
Yeah.
after they've been with the company for 40 years.
Yeah.
It really made me see that this wasn't an environment that I wanted to be in. It just felt soulless. It felt lifeless. It wasn't bringing any fulfillment.
Yeah.
And so what happened is I was there for about 6 months in total, but the last 2 months that I was there, or I'd say, let me retract, I'd say 4 months into it, I started looking on YouTube videos, trying to find someone that could change or something. I don't know, I was just looking at YouTube videos about people that are increasing your mental health or increasing your intelligence, or just motivational speakers. And I ended up following on a guy named Jim Quick, who is incredible, by the way. He ended up having a video on memory. And throughout this video, he teaches you how to think smarter, read faster, just have more memory, brain function health, just being a smarter individual. And being a welder, you're always treated like you're an idiot. So I think it was my way of kind of separating myself, and that I wanted to use my brain instead. And so that's how I found him. And then after a few videos, I ended up finding one video where he had a really long speech and he listed a couple books. His big philosophy is readers are leaders, and that if you're reading 4 to 6 books a month, you're going to be a CEO of a company. That's just like what he says that makes it kind of cool to then read and make you start believing in yourself. And so one of the books that he listed, I picked up on, and that was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This book rearranged my way of thinking and gave me a lot of insight into my way of thinking. And it gave me a chance to flip that around and then personally take the power within my own hands to change my life.
Yeah.
And after I started reading and I started to feel better, I started to think differently, I ended up starting to see different opportunity. Once I felt like I was prepared and when I was ready and when I actually saw myself as somebody else, more opportunity popped up in my brain, where that's when I found photography. And it literally just kind of flashed inside my head. And it was just, that's pretty much what happened. And it was just because I prepared myself by reading books. And another book that helped, I should have mentioned before, that actually taught me how to do this was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. But what it teaches you is it teaches you how to unlock your sixth sense, is what he calls it. You can call it pretty much anything. But it's basically thinking incredibly hard on something and then focusing on it day in and day out with a huge desire and passion. And eventually, if you're trying to think of like a way to, it could be for anything, like whatever you want. If you think really hard on it and then you let your brain release, eventually the answer will just come to you. Like the energy of the world will just give you the answer.
Yeah.
And so I thought day in and day out about what I really wanted. And I kept thinking like, I want to do something else. I want to do something else. And I kept reading and changing my pattern, changing my habits. And eventually I was ready to accept the answer. And then photography literally just popped inside my head. And the next day I bought a camera and started practicing and just started researching and taking pictures and doing self-portraits and trying to learn how to do lighting and just all these kinds of things. So I basically work from 2 to 11:30, and I would go home. Even though they asked me to do overtime, there was like no way I was going to do that, because I just knew that I just didn't want to be there. I was just super miserable.
Yeah.
I'd come home, and then I would basically practice photography for like 3 to 4 hours up until 3 or 4 a.m. That, or edit photos that I've previously taken, and then go to sleep, wake up at like 9, and then go to the gym, eat something, and then read some more, and then repeat the process over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And this happened for the next 2 months. And then eventually it became to where I was slacking off at work so much because I was just so miserable, so depressed, and I wanted to do photography instead, that I would actually spend my time studying photography in my booth instead of actually doing the work. And so eventually I was like, it came to a point where I was so miserable that I was like, okay, I'm going to quit on March 1st. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And I declared it. I made a post about it, and I was like, I'm going to quit March 1st. And then because my performance, I actually got fired like February 8th or something like that. So it was a month before I was going to quit. And so it kind of jump started me into this. And ever since then, I've just been pushing myself through the process of learning photography, learning business, learning how to make it as an actual entrepreneur. And it was kind of, there's something in Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, that it says, burn your bridges. And it's basically leaving yourself no escape. And so I tried to force myself into a position where it would take me, or I put myself in a position where there was no escape. And so it forced me to change myself as an individual so that I can learn how to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's such an inspiring story, honestly. I think, so many people, like, they want to, they don't like their jobs and they want to do something else, like a lot of people, but they don't know where to start or really what to do. So that's really amazing that you did something about it. So what's your kind of advice for people who want to do something but just don't really know what to start? Like you said, YouTube videos and stuff.
There's too much advice in the world, to be honest. It
Mm-hmm.
just matters if you actually have the will to want to do it, because if you have the will, you're going to find it. I'd say the biggest thing that could really make an impact that might hit some people is that you have to change yourself and the way you view the world first.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same way, for instance, like if you view an old lady, she's like 9 years old, she's crossing the street, you're going to go ahead and help her because that's the way you see the world. That's the way you view her as a person. Like, you want to help her. If you want to help her, I don't know if anybody else doesn't want to help her, but I know I do. And then what if you saw someone who is very young, who is like 18, supple, strong? Obviously, you wouldn't help them walk across the street. So you could use the same application into seeing that if you can see things differently in your life, you'll see different actions that you can take. And what you need to do is you need to change your habits of what you're doing, because whatever you're doing right now, if it's not working, it's obviously not going to work the next day or the next day or the next day. So the big thing is just simply changing a habit. And as soon as you change that, which is the hardest thing to do, because it's like the whole theory behind a rocket ship where it takes like 95% of the energy is just lifting off from the very beginning. And then once you're in outer space, it's like smooth sailing. It's the same theory with changing yourself, is it takes a massive amount of energy to change and shift that. But as soon as you do, that's when you can make that change within your life. And it's really freaking hard to do. So
yeah, it's hard, but it's rewarding.
Yeah, and that's what it takes, though. So I mean, it's just self-awareness is key. Being able to look at yourself and seeing what you want. I think once you figure out what you want, then what'll happen is that will unlock a power inside yourself to then go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not looking at yourself, if you're not feeling out what you want, then obviously that energy is not going to give you anything, because you're not thinking about what you want.
Definitely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot easier to know where you're going if you have a goal in mind.
Yeah.
If you know where you're actually going. If you don't know, then you're just kind of either limbo or...
And even if you get there, it doesn't feel as rewarding because you never planned on it. So it's not like you had a challenge, you just randomly stumbled upon it. But when you actually make a goal, it gives you resistance. And if you're pushing past resistance, then you're growing, And if you're growing, you're going to feel more fulfilled and just better. So that's why goals are extremely important.
Definitely. How does like having your own business affect your life now compared to before?
It's, oh man, it's incredibly stressful. It's also, I've never been more happy, but it still puts so much more pressure on you. Especially when you're starting up a business, they usually say like, you're not going to make any money within the first 3 years. And I think because when you're starting out your business, you're still trying to figure out why you're doing it, your branding, and how to basically connect all the dots. Yeah. Like say for a photographer like me, when I started out, I was simply trying to learn photography. And what I would do is I would go to these model calls where I would go and shoot these beautiful women trying to develop my portfolio. And then as I had all these amazing pictures, I realized that my target audience that was actually going to pay me was not models, because models just don't pay. So then I realized that I had to then shoot people that were everyday, ordinary people. And then from here, you also have to learn who you click with as a person. You have to learn who you match well with. You have to learn who's the actual demographic that's actually going to make your business successful. Then you have to cater your new portfolio to these people. So then you have to go find these people without actually having a portfolio that shows any of them. And then there is building up your website. And then there's getting your business cards and like all these little tiny things that just stack up and stack up and stack up. And then if you do all this stuff and then you realize that it wasn't the right thing, then you have to change again. And then you have to shift all that stuff around again. And it just becomes this huge clusterfuck of many things that are traveling inside your head and going in and out. And I think that's the most difficult part, is the beginning, because your brain is just filled with so much to do that you oftentimes get analysis paralysis, whereas where you're focusing on so much that you don't really do anything because you're stuck, because you're overwhelmed. So it's been hectic, but I mean, I'm through the beginning stage, so it just feels much better. And now I can actually have a clear message when I go and speak to people, and I'm starting to find clients that match well with me. And it was all just trial and error and figuring out what works best. And education was huge. I finally found a business mentor, which is probably more important than actually learning photography. So that was pretty big. And it's just been just education, learning, growing, trying, failing, being miserable, because nobody wants to find you in your business. And then all of a sudden someone finds you, so you feel happy, and then you get this traction, and it keeps going. And it's just a whirlwind of emotions, and it's chaos, but it's still, I'd rather do this than go back to a 9-to-5.
Definitely, because you're working on yourself and your dream and your future than working on someone else's.
Yeah, and you're not limited. That was a big thing too, is that I realized as a welder, you can only make so much money and you can only do so much, and you're obviously capped by what your boss tells you what to do. When you're your own boss, you have no limits. So as much as you believe in yourself and how confident you are in yourself, you can take that as far as you want. You're not capped by any other individual that's telling you what to do or what not to do. You can grow as much as you want, or you can sink if you want. It's just your choice.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask about the topic of being afraid to start. How important do you think it is to just act on it and start and learn along the way?
I literally started right away. I think a lot of that was just basically every entrepreneur usually says, just go for it and just do it and you'll learn. There's a beautiful book that explains this, which is Don't Move My Cheese. And it explains the different ways or the different personalities that you could have in regards to change. Some people have analysis paralysis, where they think about something and they don't act on it, and they just keep thinking and keep thinking, keep thinking. Some people are like that, and eventually they don't make a move. Some people have the analysis paralysis, but eventually they finally figure it out and they do make a move, and then they gain the momentum. And then some people just instantly do it. Now, all three, or there's four of them. The other guy is the same thing, where he instantly moves, but he just scurries without sensing anything. He just keeps moving without any direction. So three of those work. One of them doesn't. Obviously, the one, if you think too much and you don't do anything, is obviously the only one for failure. Depending on who you are, all three of those would work, but some take longer than others. So if you're thinking about something, you could learn it much faster if you just did it. But obviously, not everybody is built to do it this way. But
Yeah.
So it's not important that you do it, but it will speed up the process if you just do it. If you think about it, I always compare it to the way if you ask a girl out on a date. It's that same feeling with going and asking someone out in your business. So the more you train yourself to just get over that fear of rejection, that's the biggest part, honestly.
Yeah.
So it's not important that you just instantly start, but it's important that you do start. And you just know that one takes longer than the other, but eventually they both get to the same goal.
Yeah, totally.
So it's just, how long do you want to take? How much fear do you have to deal with? Because, I mean, everybody comes from a different background. Everybody has levels of fear that they have to deal with. Maybe you have issues with your family. Maybe you have issues with your friends. Maybe you have issues with insecurity. I mean, everybody was raised differently, so maybe you have more things to deal with. And that's why some people just think more, because they've been through more pain maybe. And so it just causes them to think so much that they want to stay away from that pain. And a huge thing about being an entrepreneur is it's all pain. So it's just basically being able to embrace the fact that it's going to hurt. And as soon as you embrace that and you just move towards it, it becomes a lot easier. And then it becomes almost numb when somebody rejects you, because you're just like, okay, move on to the next one. And you just, I don't know, you just have to keep trying. And wherever level you're at is just start. And then if you're not starting, don't give up hope. Just find ways to build your confidence in some way until you can. Like for me, I'm not a person that instantly does a lot of things. Like for me, starting photography was really easy because it was fun and it was enjoyable for me to actually pick up a camera. But the business side for me was incredibly difficult. It took me a while to actually grow confidence within myself. In fact, I had to actually take up a separate job, which was teaching group fitness classes, so that I could force myself to be in front of people, so that I had the confidence to then talk to people, because I had zero social skills when I was a welder. I was stuck in a cubicle. I was miserable. And so I didn't want to be around myself. And if you don't want to be around yourself, nobody else wants to be around you. So I had to change big time. And it took me a lot more energy to get out of that stage in my life of being so afraid to speak to others or be out there and just make myself vulnerable, that I actually had to find a job that pushed me into a position where I'm literally in front of 30 people and forcing myself to just be myself. And so, I don't know, you just have to find a way and start. But obviously, if you don't start, don't beat yourself up. You'll eventually get there if you have the will.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. I want to emphasize the part where, you have to really want it and have to have a really big, strong will, because in starting a business, you're going to run into challenges, and it like you said, it's painful, it's hard. And so when people run into those challenges, your will has to be strong enough to overcome that. Say that winners never quit and quitters never win,
Simple as that is, it's so true.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
exactly.
think, um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask if you could explain further what you mean when you say that people may be numb to the fact that they're dying.
Um, I was actually going to ask you to remind me a little bit. What were we talking about at that point?
We were talking about how people are just working 9 to 5s all the time and they don't realize that they're actually not growing it inside. And so
Hmm.
therefore they're dying.
Yes. Okay, that brings it back to self-awareness. I
Mm-hmm.
think most is basically realizing what you're doing. And if you don't have your conscience about you and thinking about how you're actually, let me start over. It's like, it's having the self-awareness of what you're doing and how you're feeling at the moment. If you don't have this, you're going on with your life, kind of just moving through the system as it shapes you. Um, Being on television, Netflix, all that kind of stuff, it literally numbs your thought process instead of actually using your brain to then think about ways to improve yourself or ways to live the way you want to. And so I think a lot of people, just statistically, people watch so many movies or don't, or there's more successful entrepreneurs than not, um, is just due to the fact that people are lacking the effort to really think about what they truly want.
Yeah.
I feel this, once you figure out what you want, you start to understand that what you're doing isn't towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. That question's stumping me.
Well, I agree with you that a lot of people may not necessarily know what they want, where they're going. They just kind of feel pressured by society to go to college, get a job, or even if they don't go to college, just get a job and have that job to pay the bills. And then they come home and just watch Netflix or whatever, and they don't really spend their time maybe doing things outside of the normal that excites them and brings them joy.
Hmm.
No. Yeah.
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 Well, the thing is, a lot of people don't actually get taught how to um, expand their mind or be self-aware. Most people are born into a life where it's just like they're funneled into these programs that they're taught to live by.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some people just don't even have the ability to even think outside the box. And they don't know what's outside the box because they don't even understand that they're in a box.
Yeah.
They're just suffocating day in and day out, unaware that there's this amazing life that comes from a little bit of um, persistence and struggle between thinking differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's going to shape you to get, or that's going to break you out of the box, is basically being able to be aware of what you're doing. And if you're not, then you're just stuck. And people don't even, I think that brings back to the point about what you want, is that you're not fully satisfied unless you're actually going towards what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And people get fed things that they think they want. But if you don't actually have the self-awareness to know that that's exactly what you want, it's not going to be fulfilling.
Yeah.
It's just going to be numbing.
And I also want to add to that how if you're just, or if someone is going to try to fulfill a goal placed upon them by someone else that they don't actually want, they're a lot more prone to actually failing at achieving that because they
Yeah.
don't actually want it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think a couple sessions where you go goal setting is so powerful, and it can just instantly shift your energy. Because once you figure out what you want, it's like that's what you want. It's just like if you're hungry and you're going to go to a snack, nothing's going to stop you from go getting that food. And that's because you understand completely 100% that you want it, and it's this need. Being able to actually shift that into a mental goal, and then being that hungry for that goal, the same way you're hungry for that burrito at 12 o'clock at midnight. It's the same feeling, but you understand being hungry more than being hungry for a goal more, because you haven't set it. You haven't let it sink into your feelings. You feel hungry, and that's why you do it. You need to feel hungry for a goal for it to actually make that shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one of the things, like, I think some people, they understand they want more. And then they get urges, you know, but then, like we said before, they'll numb it out with some other drugs, alcohol, some distraction.
A distraction.
And just distractions can be so lethal to dreams.
I noticed that yesterday. I was actually getting mentally distracted. And after that, I asked myself why. And it was because I was so afraid of moving forward because I knew the pain that it held. And so now I saw this distraction as a weakness. And so what happened was it triggered in my brain that it's a challenge to actually press forward and keep learning. It's not that I have ADHD or I'm distracted. It's because there's an actual mental block or an emotional block that's keeping me from moving forward.
Yeah.
And so after realizing this, I was like, okay, well, now I can use this as the same way that I train physically, because I train physically really hard. And it's much easier for me to go to the gym and train really hard than it is for me to take on a book and then hit the book really hard. It's much more difficult. So as soon as I saw this being as a mental challenge for me, I was like, okay, now I can actually shift it into something fun. Now I know that if I keep learning and I keep educating myself and I keep moving forward with going out and marketing my business, this is helping me actually push past those mental and emotional barriers, helping me to actually grow.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be that you're self-inflicting this distraction because you're wanting to block yourself from moving forward into a situation that makes you scared.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a habit.
Yeah. And then you make it into a habit, because you always know I noticed that there was a thought right before I get distracted, and it was like, I want to do this. And then instantly I just go to like YouTube and get distracted. And I was like, wait, I literally was on the video. I was like, why did I do that? Like, I literally just thought of something to do, but then I just distracted myself. And I was like, I started to look at it and I was like, oh, it's because emotionally it's scary. And as soon as I realized it was scary, I was like, well, screw that. I don't care. It's not a big deal. I'll just go into the fear and break it down.
Yeah.
But it's that self-awareness that makes a huge difference. That's so difficult to keep track of.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything we want is on the other side of fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking of a discussion or something to say, and it's like say if you have like a level that's balanced of courage and fear,
Mm-hmm.
if you let fear take the wheel, then it drops. And if you let it take again, it drops and drops and drops. If you have courage, it goes up just a little bit. But there's still that bar at the medium spot where you let fear sink into your life more than you let courage. Once you can keep doing courageous things instead of letting your fear take the choice, then all of a sudden, once you're past there, it becomes much easier to take the risk, because now you have that level where your body is now filled with courage instead of fear, which
Love
I
that.
thought was kind of cool. So if you keep doing courageous things, it'll break down the fear more and more. Of course, the fear can always come back if you let that fear take control, and it'll go back down until fear consumes your body. But if you take that courage, or if you keep taking the leaps, you can go up to courage, and all of a sudden it becomes much easier to actually do courageous things because now you're filled with courage.
Definitely.
Fear is Fear's a bitch.
Yeah. I just want to say, like, to add to that, when I first started filming podcasts, you know, there's always this feeling of nervousness. There's always some nerves involved. But when
Yeah.
I first was starting to film podcasts, I had to like sit there, like breathe in and out, like
Hmm.
I got this, like it's okay, and try to like pep talk myself. And nowadays, it's like there's always still gonna be a little bit of nerves, of course. You're talking
Hmm.
to someone. It's I think if you care about something, there's always gonna be a little bit of nerves there.
Yeah.
But it's so much better now. I've gone public speaking. And
Hmm.
it's just like I've posted like 60 something blogs now, and it's like the very first blog I was so nervous, and now I've done it over 60 times. So
Yeah.
it gets better. It
That was
gets
like
better.
me at networking events. When I first went to my first networking event, it was like the strangest thing in the world to me because I was like, usually I just stay at home. I go 9 to 5, come back, play computer games, whatnot, and then I was just basically isolated in both my job and my life. And going out into a networking event was like the strangest, scariest thing, just being vulnerable in front of people.
Hmm.
And the first day I went, it was just like barely talking to anybody, like hoping that somebody comes up and talks to me so that I can actually say something, and just feeling super awkward, walking around the room, making circles, just like constant circles, like taking the same route, hoping that I can talk, like build up the courage to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And it was just, oh, it was so bad. And then now it's like when I go into a networking event, I have so much more confidence and knowledge within my business and myself.
Yeah.
Um, I literally just go up and talk to anybody, and it's like super easy, super simple. And the most beautiful part, the very first day I went was so funny. Um, every time I stroke up a conversation with somebody, the first thing we talked about was how we were both scared to be here. It was like everybody was in the same boat. Everybody felt the
Yeah.
same way. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And it just gave me this, I was relaxed for the next one to come because I was like, okay, well, if everybody feels this way, then I don't really have to worry so much, because then it just means that everybody's in their own head, and therefore nobody's thinking about me, which is what everybody always thinks. It's like, oh, it's always about you. And so
Yeah.
now I just go in, I'm just like, what up? How's it going? Crack jokes, dance around, don't care. And it's just like, it's so easy to be myself now. And that was only because I kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So, where can my listeners find your services?
Um, Plug alert. zlwphotography.com.
Awesome.
Zachary Lee Witt, ZLW. And that's
Awesome. And that's Wit with two T's.
yeah, but it's for the website, it's just ZLW Photography.
Oh, okay. Awesome. And what is your main message for listeners?
Main message. There's so many main messages on YouTube right now with so many people, and there's so much content that you can be filled with. And one of the things that I learned was I used to listen to so many people and try to get so much advice from professionals and people that were successful. And there's so many times when people that are successful say one thing, and another person that's successful, just as successful, says the opposite of what they said you should do. And so it got me to thinking
Mm-hmm.
that you really have to figure out what works best for you personally. And the only way to do that is to actually ask yourself and be self-aware and to think for yourself. But listening to people that are more successful you does give you more knowledge and more insight and more perspective. So I don't say stop listening to people that are more successful and smarter and have the ability to do more than you at the moment, have more resources. Keep listening to them, but make sure that you're taking it with a grain of salt and you're applying that to your own personality, to your own situation, and basically just
Yeah.
really think for yourself, because the most power and energy and intelligence that you can get is from simply asking your questions to yourself, like why, what, where you are. Just being self-aware is key. And so listening to me, if you find something, don't just take it and then run with it. Think about it and then apply it to your life and see how it actually works instead.
Mm-hmm.
And then therefore you're actually developing your own mindset instead of just listening and then doing. That
Yeah.
way it becomes your own energy, your own power, and your own drive. So
Mm-hmm.
listen to people that are smarter than you, but then think about how it actually applies to your life and think about if you agree or not. And don't just take what people say and run with it.
Love that. It's such good advice. Honestly, it really is really like such good advice. Um, it's something my dad has told me. It's something I've had to learn from personal experience. And I think that it's just something everyone should know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so much, and especially nowadays, um, there's so much. It's like you literally have um, everybody at the palm of your hand, and then you have people screaming in your ear left and right just because your phone is like near your face all the time. It's so difficult, and limiting yourself on social media is huge. Um, I think I started doing that maybe about a month ago, and it's been drastically improving my mental health. And I limit myself to like a couple minutes on Facebook, and that's just to check emails and inbox and stuff like that. And then if I find myself scrolling, I know I've been on there too long because I know that I'm just literally wasting my time instead of actually doing something towards what works for my business or what works
Yeah,
for me growing. And
definitely.
it's just stop scrolling, honestly, unless you're like intentionally doing it to relax and you understand that. Otherwise, try to catch yourself. Self-awareness is pretty much the key.
This is like right now with the coronavirus, especially. I feel like it's an
Yeah,
extra wise time to not scroll.
it's so
But
hard.
yeah,
I don't even know what you do with coronavirus right now. I mean, I'm still going outside, and it's still like, oh man, it's so beautiful out lately. We're
um,
starting to get the rain, and it's really nice outside. But I don't know. The coronavirus is kind of hitting everything pretty hard, and I think it's for me. I was gonna say something before I think we started the chat was that I've read a book. It was Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. And one of the things he pounds into your brain is that in the greatest time of panic, in the greatest time of need, when people are panicking the most, that's when you have the most opportunity. And so I think that's why you were saying that it's refreshing to see somebody doing well in the virus. And
yeah,
that's because my mentality is built for when things go AWire and people are going crazy. I feel like because I read that book, it switched my brain to think that if I'm happy and still going for what I want in life and not letting that drag me down, then I'm part of the 1%, which makes me feel strong and like my business is going to thrive because I'm able to break that fear and not join the mass in panic.
mm-hmm.
So that was kind of interesting. I kind of like it, to be honest. I like the whole virus thing and what it's doing to everybody. I like that it's joining the world together. I think it's really incredible. And to be honest, the virus itself is only causing, it's not causing that many deaths. It's not that big of a deal as far as death rate goes. It's more of the fear it's instilling and the economic implications. Like, holy crap, I hear everybody's business is like suffering dramatically. The stock market's crashing.
Yeah, people
It's just
can't
going
work.
crazy. And then people can't work. And so for me, I'm just making connections and I'm using this time to develop myself. And I feel like it forces me to because there's so many times when I want to read a book or I want to dive deeper into who I am and realize more about myself, but I just don't do it because I feel like I can go out and get another client or I can go out and meet someone or I can go out and do something and I just don't take the time. But the coronavirus is forcing you to stay inside and it gives you this luxury of forcing patience on you.
And
And
reflect.
therefore now it's like you can use this time to actually do the things that you've always wanted to do, which is pretty much meditate and figure out what you want in life or where you're going or read more education. And like now is the greatest chance for you to actually use that to your benefit.
Yeah.
And so I
Totally.
like it. I think it's exciting, and I like it. I think it's cool. But I mean, of course, obviously, the tragedy. Sorry for anybody who feels it, but still, I mean, there's tragedy with everything. There's more deaths with people crashing that happen within this day than the coronavirus has taken in its entirety. So it's like, I don't know. It's just, don't let the fear get to you. Don't try to join the masses, and just keep thriving in any chance that you get. And if you cheat yourself to thrive when other people are panicking, you then start to develop the actual attributes it takes to actually be a leader.
Definitely. That's great. So my last question is, what does the universe mean to you?
As we were discussing before, I couldn't make sense of the question, but if I was to say, in the context of just looking out in the stars, the way you described it, and seeing and just looking up and seeing what it all means. When you look outside in the stars, there's just an infinite amount of space. And the way you can translate that is an infinite amount of opportunity, that there's so much you can do. I mean, think about how you could be a person that could literally build a rocket ship that flies to another planet, like Elon Musk. It's like, you never would have thought this was possible, but it happened, and it did, and things can constantly be groundbreaking and beyond what you think is possible.
Yeah.
So it's like, for me, looking out into the universe is like looking out at an endless amount of possibility, and that there's so much that you can do, and keeping your head open. And if you keep your head open, then eventually when the opportunity comes, your mind will be ready to accept it.
Yes. I love that.
Yes.
I love it. Like, all the way. I think the universe is totally full of opportunity. That's a great answer. Totally.
Glad I can bang that one out.
So thanks for coming on the podcast today and sharing your story and your messages. And I think it's going to help a lot of people, Zach. Thank you.
Hopefully, or that'd be a waste of time.
It will. I think it will.
Anyway, thank you for listening. That was very nice.
Do you want to just mention your website one more time before we end the chat?
Sure. Plug number 2, zlwphotography.com.
So that's zlwphotography.com. Okay.
Basically or I should probably explain just a little bit. I do portraits for families, individuals, and I also do business professionals portraits as well, and their marketing. So,
okay. Awesome.
I got connections too, so if you guys need any help with anything, of course, give me a call and I can help you out as best I can.
And that's Zachary Witt on LinkedIn as well, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, awesome. So
all right,
have a great day, Zach. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.